Hey guys, so it's rather, I don't know, kind of dull Tuesday morning. I just finished a university class. We're still doing them online, which is kind of cool because you don't have to drive in and deal with all the walking and talking and traffic and whatnot. So you get a lot more out of the day when you're not spending it, roaming all over God's country. But then again, the students, so in this last class I had was 28 students, and we're using Zoom, and they have this cool feature, if you don't know about it, called breakout rooms, where you can create kind of miniature meetings within the main meeting with any given number of people. The problem is that once you're in the mini meeting, you have no way really of accessing any audio or video from the other meetings, which would be really confusing if you could. I mean, I understand the functionality, but it means that people can just kind of not do anything while you're not in the room with them, and then you have to kind of bounce around everywhere. So it works out. The people who are lazy really stand out. The serious ones, if they're like last on the list, you'll get down and they're still practicing whatever you gave them, and they ask questions. And like the unserious ones, within 3 minutes of starting, are telling you, "Oh, I'm finished. We're done." If they respond, a lot of times they just turn their microphone off and hide. I made a few announcements to classes about that, like, don't do that. It's none of them want to use their video. Okay, fine, but just turning off your audio, it's the same really as just like getting up and walking out of the classroom. So it's a little bit frustrating, but I try to keep it in perspective for the most part, which is actually a super valuable skill. And I'm gonna just make some coffee here. Hold on a second. Hopefully I'll remember in time before time's out. When you're a business owner or whatever it is, you're just moving through life, really. I mean, there's very little difference between moving through life in an attempt to be conscious and beneficial and improve things along the way. There's no real difference between that and starting a business, save for that in starting a business, you're taking some explicit financial risk and pursuing explicit financial gain, hopefully, probably. But other than that, it's really all about mentality, which is something I'm coming to find is more and more and more true, despite how often you hear it. And there's a lot of people that will kind of take advantage of that because it's a kind of nebulous concept, like, buy my course and get the entrepreneur mentality, or hack the entrepreneur mindset, or whatever it is. Some of it's valuable. I mean, there's definitely value to be had in learning from people who've done things before and kind of extracting the key points. That can make a massive difference instead of just like wandering around like, I want to be positive, I want to be helpful, I want to do something. You can lose a lot of time doing that, but sorry, it's kind of loud. This is my super rad Seattle cup. I got this a few years ago when I was back, Seattle, Washington. Missed the place, but it's so expensive now. I can never move back. Oh yeah, don't say that's another thing. Don't ever say never. Just say, at this time it would not be feasible, because mentality and then also your words are extremely powerful. Probably in that order, I would say. Your mind really kind of leads you through life, whether you notice it or not. In the West, we've got this, I mean, it's useful in an empirical way, this reductionist, purely physical approach to understanding things based much on the scientific method, which is great for manipulating the elements and understanding how the moon and stars work, and systems in our bodies and things. But it kind of ignores this gaping hole that is, or we might even call it a chasm that has not yet been bridged, which is, why do we experience anything at all? What's happening there? There's no correspondence, no 100% accurate correspondence between any kind of neural activity and then what we're actually experiencing. Although they're getting closer, apparently they're able to kind of tell what people are dreaming about, and if you imagine something, they can kind of say, oh, you're thinking about an apple or something. But even so, it doesn't really explain the experience of you being you and all of that. Anyways, my point is that mentality is extremely powerful, and one of the big hang-ups I've found, and I'm sure others have found as well, is that probably the number one enemy to a healthy mentality is succumbing to stress, right? And if you think about it, if you ask yourself, like, what really causes stress? In a physical sense, it's something being overloaded, taking on more weight usually than it's designed for, or weight at an angle that the structure can't handle, right? That's why, if you, like when I was 14, I was skateboarding and I fell in this really weird way. I'd fallen in that way hundreds of times before, but because I fell on it was a beauty bark. I was trying to grind this rail over a little garden, and I fell back. And because it was softer than concrete, my arm broke, bang, just like that. So it was a type of stress on the body that it just wasn't able to compensate. Totally effortless. There was no sense of impact, no sense of, really falling. Anyways, so my point is, in a physical sense, stress is always attributable in a very like one-to-one ratio, But with mentality, it's not. And a lot of times when we talk about stress, there are physical causes, like bad nutrition, not having enough rest, and being physically out of shape, If you're overweight and you smoke and drink every night and you only get 4 or 5 hours of sleep and you live off coffee and donuts, that's going to set your body up to feel pretty miserable most of the time. Although a lot of people in that state may not notice it because they're so focused on sugar and caffeine and nicotine and alcohol that that's kind of that's what's occupying their mental space. But if you go beyond that and you assume, okay, that you're, physically you're optimal, right? You're healthy, you've got enough rest, fairly good nutrition, you take care of yourself to the point where you can look at yourself in the mirror and not feel too bad, you're not obese, so to speak. Beyond that, the stress is almost 100% mental. It's really about what you're choosing to focus on mentally, how you're processing things emotionally, and that's pretty much it. So an example might be, maybe you're worried about a student quitting, and you think about it, you're laying in bed at night, like, what should I do? And so there's your focus, right? You're really focusing on that to the exclusion of other things, some of which might be helpful. And then that can generate a lot of anxiety, that feeling of not having an answer. Can bring in a lot of extra emotional static, and then before you know it, you're completely stressed out. This happens to us all the time. I notice it a lot in my life, but recently I've been trying to step back from it as much as I can, because when you really look at things, there are just results, You do something or you don't, and then there's a result or there isn't. There's really no more to it. So if you look at someone who started a successful business, they may have taken on a lot of emotional burden and put their minds and then thereby their bodies through a lot of mostly unnecessary stress. You have to ask yourself, what was the point of that? What was it worth it? Did it help? And a lot of times the answer is no. We feel like, because we're putting all this emotional energy into something, that it's going to help it be more efficient or better. And there's a certain point where that's true, and I think that point is called taking something seriously and trying to do a good job. Beyond that, the extra drama and worry can actually detract from the final result, And I felt that. I remember I've come home, I've worked, I think the longest was like 7 weeks without a day off, where it's just like, you're just so tired, and you start just drinking more and eating more crap food because you're stressed out, and it's this weird hyper spiral. And then you have to realize, like, okay, just look at the data. What are you doing? And a lot of times you're trying to kind of compensate for a lack of control, which is where a lot of stress comes from. You want things to be better, and you're kind of mentally and emotionally trying to change them somehow without taking any real concrete action. And it's a totally kind of backwards, insane way to do things. And personally, I'm trying to stop that, not do it quite so much. But it's an interesting idea, right? Like how you modulate your own mind, your own consciousness can completely change how you experience your own life, and then what you're actually able to accomplish in that life. And it's not about being an alpha male or female, or being ultra aggressive, or sleeping less, or buying more courses, or whatever. It's really about just focusing on what you're doing, being objective, and if you feel there's a reason to be concerned about something or worried, maybe focus on what you can do about it instead of feeling like scared or stressed out about it or nervous. And one of the biggest antidotes I've found is just stepping back and doing some exercise, going for a walk, going cycling, running, lifting some weights, and just focus on that, focus on what you're doing, and your mind will kind of clear itself out, and you can come back to the situation, even just like a half an hour later even, and look at it freshly without all of that like ambient fatigue that you didn't notice before. And you can, usually there's some kind of an option, whatever it is. If it's business related, there's normally something you can do, and especially in Japan, the Japanese really they put a lot of value on kind of wrapping things up cleanly and moving forward. It's very, very rare anyone's going to get upset with you, and it happens. There's some weird people everywhere, but if you really do have the intention of making things better and rectifying things and doing a decent job, your problems are probably going to be few. And then even if you do have them, that same attitude is going to help you to focus on solutions instead of problems, which is really what it's about. Problems happen in life, and one thing I've learned from being focused on learning software development is that a lot of it is about problem solving. Almost all of it, actually, once you build a certain familiarity with the syntax and how things work. It's really just about finding what's causing the problem and then fixing it. And that's about it, So if you're able to focus on solutions instead of on the magnitude of the problem, and how big and scary it is, which is a total mistake. It'll totally get you killed, literally and figuratively. Then things start to open up, and you can start using all that mental and emotional energy to work on a solution. And it's about just being present and focused and realistic, kind of avoiding those extremes of arrogance and fear, which are both equally destructive and poisonous, in my opinion. So anyways, yeah, those are just some thoughts I wanted to share today. I kind of finished up today's class and was just thinking about stuff. And it's so easy to get hung up on something mentally, and if you don't have the desire to kind of figure out how to deal with stuff and kind of try to keep things in perspective, including yourself and your relationship to the world, that kind of stuff can be really overwhelming. So, but if you are focused on kind of being better at life, hashtag I suck at life, if you're kind of against all of that, it's surprising what can be done. So hopefully, we can continue that kind of thinking in our own lives. Okay, cool. Bye.